Hello. I'm sorry to do this to you, but you have likely been sent this video as a threat, and I am the muscle to somehow threaten you into compliance. My name is Arthur, and no, sit down. We will learn about 40k and like it. Hello, everyone else. It's me, your boy, Mr. Bones, and I'm making this video so you can send it to your friends who know literally nothing about Warhammer 40k, and I mean literally nothing, and this video is going to try and cover the bare minimum history, stories, lore, and gameplay of 40k so that if you wanted to get your friends into it, this is a good jumping off point that isn't bricky. 1,000 bricks upon his name. This is as good as it gets, really. To all those who were sent this video out of the blue, well, sorry. Either way, you're watching this because you feel like you want to know more. Cool. Good for you. 40k is an incredibly expansive and amazing universe with so many different games, settings, miniatures, and most importantly, books. So, it can be daunting to find out what would work best for people to get into the setting and expand from there. So, with that being said, we are going to get you indoctrinated early, or my name is an Arthur P. Bones. The P, by the way, stands for Patrick, or Piss. Depends on how far along in the relationship we are. Anyway, remember to stick through to the end for the best tips on where to go from here. Hype the video on mobile, because apparently that does something. Subscribe to keep the spice flowing, and before we get into it, we have ourselves a funky fresh sponsor to throw at all of you. Hi, hello. So, of all the things that I could put right here in a beginner's guide video, I think something practical, affordable, useful, and a downright blessing would be probably the correct option, right? Fellas, the lad from Tabletop Stronghold is back again, friend of the channel, and just alright guy in general. Tabletop Stronghold makes probably the best and most stylish magnetic MDF cases in the game. I use them to store damn near every good-looking miniature I have. For travel, for storage, for display, they fit the bill for everything. I have my XL case set up in my regular game room, and I get a lot of compliments from my guests right before I hold them at gunpoint to go buy their own. Using code BONES25, of course, you will get 25% off the case, and we'll be supporting the channel as well. As much as I talk about the XL, I do think that if you want a prime storage case, then the Mini is actually really good as well, taking up less space, and since I've been playing a lot of skirmish games, it's fantastic to transport minis from my house to my local game store, where it obviously attracts the gaze of all the nerds that show up. So, as usual, use code BONES25 at checkout for 25% off. Click my link in the description or the pinned comment to get you there, and thanks again to Tabletop Stronghold for sponsoring my channel. And let's get back to being educational. Yeah, let's do that. So let me learn you fuckers something. Warhammer 40k, first and foremost, is a tabletop game. The miniatures exist to be sold, and the books are usually just a means to promote the setting, thus promoting the miniatures. The game can exist without the lore, but the lore can't exist without the game. So before we even get into the lore, let's get into the history. I'm gonna summarize it a bit, but back in the day, 3 dudes named John, Ian, and Steve founded a company by the name of Games Workshop. As the name would imply, they were producers of cheap and affordable games you couldn't really get outside of their stores. I mean, it's nothing crazy, just board games and whatnot. They had racked up a pretty decent reputation in Great Britain, and as much as I'd love to go into the nitty-gritty of how cool it was that they found a way to press models out of the white metal that they were using, that wasn't really widely done at the time. We only have so much time here. Basically, they were approached by a one Gary Gygax, the head of Tactical Studies Rules, and were tasked with distributing an up-and-coming product known as Dungeons & Dragons. There is a funny aside where they basically tricked Gary and the TSR fellas into thinking they were just not 3 dudes producing board games out of their flat, which they totally were, but that is where they got their start, producing Dungeons & Dragons, but most importantly, producing some of the first widely commercialized metal miniatures for D&D of a higher quality than what you would expect. Now, outside of Great Britain, there wasn't really that much of an emphasis on miniatures. See, back in the day, the rules were the important part for war games and I guess the up-and-coming brand of TTRPGs. But outside of rare cases, you'd never really see them for war games. It was kind of weird. So now that they were producing it, this kind of was the birthplace of their miniatures first philosophy. They made a buttload of cash from it. I am condensing so much, but TSR tried to eventually absorb Games Workshop at some point into their fold. But this kind of fell through. They ended up not renewing their license to distribute D&D, and they ended up not coming to an agreement and thus severed ties with them, which is really funny because if you ever complain about Games Workshop being a shitty company in the modern day, then you really have no idea what fucking torment nexus we avoided by them not being absorbed into TSR and then eventually ending up in the hands of Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. Just think about that for a second. With no D&D license and still the ability to produce high-quality miniatures, they started their own media brand and setting, Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Well, there was the RPG, which then became the war game, because with war games, you could sell more minis, duh. The setting of Warhammer Fantasy Battle was a remix of the, at the time, contemporary D&D setting, with the hobbits, or halflings, I guess, humans, elves of several different alignments, orcs, and dwarves. Though, with their minis, they decided to have a more standout cartoony look. Like, if you look up old Warhammer miniatures for the fantasy games, you'll see that their aesthetic was super pulpy and very reminiscent of fantasy Golden Age comics. The continued success of Warhammer Fantasy would go on to inspire multiple editions, multiple spin-offs such as Hero Quest, Blood Bowl, and if I remember correctly, there was a jousting game at some point, but regardless, the most notable one was the sci-fi spin-off game to promote the new sci-fi model range, Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader, effectively Warhammer 40k First Edition. It was basically referred to as a skirmish war game. Now, we will get into the gaming section so that you understand what that term means later, but how it works is you had built a small team of soldiers from miniature packs you would buy from their store, and this could be a team that could be built any way you want as long as it followed within the specific guidelines of team creation. The setting was essentially built to mimic the fantasy one, with many different factions in the game being used to parallel others in the fantasy setting. Orcs from fantasy became orcs with a K from 40k, with a lot of the similar tropes. Humans were still humans, the Eldar were the elves, the Necron were the Tomb Kings, albeit they were introduced a bit later, so on, so forth. Though in modern years, they have tended to stray away from this kind of mirroring. Warhammer 40k, as it would be shorthanded later, ended up eclipsing Warhammer Fantasy in popularity, much to the chagrin of all the fantasy players out there, leading to its explosion in the modern day world. There's a lot of reasons as to why. Pull from the at the time popular sci-fi tropes and books such as Starship Troopers and Dune. Then you have a lot of the pulls from culture and history, for better or for worse. But the main aesthetic they wanted to appeal to was kind of the 80s action movie comic. Very Rob Liefeld, if you know what I'm talking about. Where everyone is super brightly colored, everyone is hot as hell with buff, shirtless men, one-handing heavy machine guns, all the women are bombshells with impractical armor. It just appealed to what would likely be considered the nerdiest of the nerds. In the modern day, it's got more of a broad appeal, which I think is dope as hell because I get paid to talk about it. 40k has had pretty steady growth throughout the year, but it's been kind of seen as the final boss of adult nerd culture, because due to its price and its expansive nature, children just have a difficulty comprehending it. But also, being able to buy an army up front does kind of require money, which I don't know if you know this, but children don't usually have that, and parents usually have other expenses like paying for the child to live. Yeah, no shocker, right? Full army can be expensive to build all at once, and even over time, it can take a long-ass while, which is why usually someone builds up an army over the course of their life, and then once they're in their 20s and they have their own job, they can just do whatever they want. But we're going to talk about armies, what they are, and why buying them is so expensive in the gameplay section. So for now, we're going to transition from the history, now that you kind of know where the game started, where it came from, and go to the lore so you can have a basic backdrop of the setting, the history of the setting, and so on. Okay? Okay. It isn't necessarily an easy thing to discuss, the lore of 40k. So for those who already sub to the channel, this is not going to be new to you guys, but to say a little early, the reason this video is being made is I have a new friend I made from a different sphere, and I was kind of inspired because they want to learn 40k so they can hang out with me and 40k friends, but they just don't understand anything that we're talking about, so it's just so spread out. So I'm here to give as much of a succinct look into the setting as possible. Now that is a bit of a daunting task, and this video is already, just by looking at my script, going to be a bit longer than I usually make for them, but hey, it is what it is. I'm just going to cover the basics here. Nothing more, nothing less, just the stuff that I think you would need to know that are the most popular topics, and then from there you can kind of learn the broad strokes. Does that mean I'm going to cover anything like gene stealer cults? No, you literally do not need to know about the gene stealer cults, but they are kind of cool. Now, where to start? Easy. As the name would suggest, the setting of this takes place in an alternate history year of 40,000. That is a bit of a misnomer. In the past, since 40k is in fact a game, first and foremost, much like every other game with a long-running history that stretches beyond like 5 years, there's a lot of pressure to increase or decrease certain statistics in the game, or at least make the game flow better. Thus, a new edition comes out every now and then with some new lore updates and so on. So with each new edition of Warhammer 40k's rule set, you have a refinement of the setting's universe, and it expands upon it. So up to about, say, 6th edition at the earliest, or the tail end of 7th edition, and if you did the little hand thing because of the numbers that I just said, I'm just going to tell you, you lost the game. The setting was kind of just that, a setting. It's this massive sprawling grimdark setting that was always poised on like the 32nd before midnight mark of everything just exploding, with various different races around at war, magic abound, psychic demon gods, and technically, if you want to get nitty-gritty about it, the year was in 41k, not just 40k. This was because any story that was written from the perspective of it already having happened. It wasn't there to push the narrative forward, it was there to just expand upon topics that had only been mentioned in the past. So something like a massive war was given more context and given a little bit more of a look into for potentially Games Workshop to make more miniatures of guys who survived said war, i.e. something like the Tyrannic War veterans. But it would never really push the year or the story forward by much, if at all. And that was kind of a key aspect of the setting, stagnancy. This setting was never going to progress, and humanity was in this perpetual downfall that never made it so that they would gain any ground, and every year that went by they would lose like 0.001%, but there was always a loss. So something like a massive war that was in the past could get several books, but it would never go up to the main setting. It was kind of the key aspect. So going from there, we are in this kind of new era where the setting is being progressed, but to get to that we kind of have to cover the 3 main categories of factions, because every faction in the game, every grouping of individuals is usually under one of these 3 banners: Imperial, Chaos, or Xenos, or aliens if you want to use a more contemporary word. In general, most Imperial factions will work together, and in general, some Chaos factions will work together, though they usually end up stabbing each other in the back in the end. But Xenos are aliens, so some of them just want to eat everything, but in general, sometimes Xenos factions will work together. Hell, they'll sometimes work with humans if the need arises, but they're complicated. We'll cover them last. The Imperium of Mankind, or the Imperial factions, are us. It is our faction. All humans and human-adjacent species are united under the same banner with a single goal of being the dominant species in the universe by whatever means necessary. And for the time, we almost did it. We had probably the greatest military leader in the history many, many, many centuries ago. Many, I guess, millennia ago at this point. An individual by the name of the Emperor, or at least that's what he was telling us, and as we know him now, and as you've probably heard his name being said in many different 40k spheres, the fucking God Emperor of Mankind. The Emperor is a key figure in the setting, probably the most key figure for the setting, and to downplay his importance would be to downplay the whole setting. He is like a 15-foot tall giant man who is perfect in every way described, and we just don't know anything about his backstory. backstory. He is the strongest psychic in human history and one of the strongest psychics in the universe in general, rivaling the might of some of the gods of the setting, which there are gods, we'll get there. So this individual shows up, a little bit before the 30K era, unites all of humanity with his ability to see the future, his sheer giant balls, and his sheer might, and is basically able to blaze a path through the universe to unite humanity under his banner, and thus, through that will alone, the Imperium of Mankind was born. All humans serve the Emperor of Mankind, as he is there to make sure that everybody survives, and why would you disagree with him? He's literally perfect. Oh yeah, by the way, prior to the 30K's years, there was this technological super evil Dark Age, but the Dark Age is a bit too deep lore. You guys don't need to know about it. Basically just a super mega apocalypse happened that led to the near extinction of humanity and the scattering of us throughout the stars, so the Empire of Mankind wanted to bind everybody back together under one flag instead of it just being a bunch of different planets that had humanity on it, under the banner of the strongest leader in human history, or in history in general, really. Okay, cool. With most of humanity conquered at a certain point on this crusade, and might I add, the Emperor was an atheistic, which I guess is a word, king. He wanted all of humanity to be united under a secular flag, and you'll see why in a little bit when we discuss what chaos is. He decided since he was only one man, he needed more leaders that were as strong as him, if not just a little bit weaker, just so he could rein them in if need be. Thus, he decided, why not clone himself? What could possibly go wrong there? Put a pin in this for later. Hell, you know what? Fuck it. Let me clone myself 20 times and just see what happens. Thus, the Primarch program had began. Sorry, I'm not good at words. Creating genetically remixed versions of himself that were weaker than him, yes, but had different specialisms. A lot of them had different remixed aspects of them, using different genetic material in order to make sure that they all could foster different perspectives and make it easier for him to understand the world around him. The Primarchs are key figures in the setting, though most of them are either missing, dead, both, or evil. Regardless of what your opinions are of the Primarchs, they are incredibly important, as they were basically what caused the setting to be what it is in the modern day. Due to some evil wizardry while they were growing in their little test tubes in the Emperor of Mankind's lab, because yes, of course he had one of those, some evil wizardry caused them to be scattered throughout the stars, being sent to random planets, some good, some bad, and yeah. The initial plan was to educate them all in the same manner, but just giving them all different aspects of the Emperor. But thankfully, due to their nature, they ended up basically growing to be like 10 to 15 feet tall on average and began to rule their planets with varying degrees of success. Now, the Primarchs were all eventually discovered by the Imperium of Mankind. 2 of them fucked up so bad, apparently, that they were struck from the record. No joke, we only know about 18 of them. Well, I guess technically 19, but that's a conversation for another day. We don't talk about Alpharius and Omegon, or maybe we do. It's confusing. My job is not easy, is the short end of this. The reason these Primarchs were important outside of military genius, psychic might, physical superiority, and their ability to command humanity, and humanity naturally just listening to them, is because their genetics were key to unlocking and enhancing the greatest weapons humanity could muster, the Space Marines. You see these guys on the posters, on the boxes, and in game stores everywhere. Space Marines are, in as shortest a way to describe them as possible, teenage boys between the ages of 9 and 12 who are abducted, recruited, or just asked politely to join a grouping of Space Marine. Each grouping of Space Marine has different methods of recruitment and gathering Space Marine aspirants, and through various trials, surgeries, and training, try to turn them into Space Marines. Think of it as them forcing a kind of side puberty where instead of growing into an adult man, they grow into an adult Space Marine. They have over 19 organs implanted into them, or 22 later, due to the changing of the Space Marines' biology into Primaris Marines, each ranging in function from them standing now on average at a height of 7 feet tall, or their musculature being so intense that they can crush a human skull with their bare hands, or spit acid like a cobra, because that is genuinely an organ they have. It's called the Betcher's gland. But yeah, they put all these in these teenage boys who then just, instead of growing to be a normal adult, they become a space marine if they survive all their training, and there is a rejection rate, but it just depends on the genetic code. See, these organs were grown from the genetic codes of their Primarchs. Each Primarch's gene seed, as it's called, is used to foster these organs through germ cells and are used to create unique and different space marines. So, say your Primarch is Leman Russ, the Lord and Primarch of the Space Wolves Legion and chapter of Space Marines, then your genetic expression is going to be similar to him. Think of it as you slowly becoming a miniature clone of the Primarch that you get the organs from. Some cause more mutation, some cause less. If you have the gene seed of Leman Russ, you basically become a werewolf and also Norse. With the Primarchs around, fresher gene seed could be created to make healthier and stronger Marines, and for some reason Space Marines fight better when they're in the presence of the Primarch. Whatever. But the Space Marines were also outfitted with two pieces of gear that are kind of the key aspects to understanding 40k, as it's kind of very important. Firstly, the Space Marine power armor, made from a material more dense and also somehow lighter than steel, because it's a sci-fi setting with war in it. It's gonna happen. It's more or less impervious. It's known as ceramite. It's pretty cool. Basically, this power armor hooks up to the Space Marine's nervous system almost directly thanks to another organ they get called the black carapace. It allows them to hook up and then unhook later with a little bit of pain, and it also gives them the strength of a hydraulic press, further augmenting their speed and physical power pretty intensely. But much more importantly than that is the bolt gun, aka the bolter, which is important. The bolt gun is a 75 caliber fully automatic rifle that fires explosive diamond-tipped bolt shells that have a gyrojet stabilizing rocket flare fueled on the back that guides them forward. Once the tip hits you, it has a 0.5 detonation where it penetrates you before exploding, causing you to explode. It sucks. It's meant to kill lightly armored targets, but it'll damn near kill anything, really. This has led to them being one of the most dangerous shock troop forces in the history of 40k. They are the spear tip of the Imperium of Mankind, as they are one of the most dangerous weapons they have. They basically punch holes in enemies that normal men couldn't, which, speaking of, here's a few more key elements to the Imperium of Mankind to understand them as a faction. Number 1, the Astra Militarum, or Tarum. Say it however you want. The Imperial Guard in shorthand, basically they are the mainstay military of the Imperium, equipped with a laser rifle called a lasgun and just flak armor. They're basically just normal military dudes with varying different degrees of training. They're the untold trillions that show up to the fight for humanity and are the backbone of the military might of the Imperium. Number 2, you have the Ecclesiarchy. Due to a certain tragedy that happened 10,000 years ago, which we're going to just hand wave for now, the Emperor ended up not being able to stop the stem of religious fervor throughout the Imperium and became deified, creating the Church of the Emperor, and the Ecclesiarchy is responsible for governing that church. Now, there is a combination of church and state, and all of the Imperium of Mankind is kind of hyper-religious because of it. It's kind of yeah. So you'll see normal military dudes fighting on the battlefield, but right next to them you will see church-going priests wearing these battle robes with a chainsaw sword in his hand, and that's what those guys are for. Number 3, you have the Adeptus Mechanicus, and they're easy but hard to understand at the same time. They're machine-worshipping wackadoos who live on Mars and constantly beseech the machine spirits, which are a thing, I guess. We don't truly know what a machine spirit is, but people will pray to them, thinking that there is a ghost in any kind of piece of machinery, that if you make it happy, the machine will function better or function at all, whatever. But these guys worship those, and they also are responsible for manning the different forges and manufactories for tanks, guns, any kind of habitation unit, or any kind of mechanical supplies that's in the setting. Oh, they also worship a demon eldritch horror dragon, but we don't talk about what's under the Noctis Labyrinthus. We don't. And number 4, the key element of the Imperium and understanding them is stagnancy and bureaucracy. Nothing exemplifies that more than the organization known simply as the Adeptus Ministorum, literally just the bureaucratic subgroup of the Imperium. There to label, categorize, and understand the various demands, requests, needs, and what have you of the Imperium, usually just stamping it down as another 1 or a 0, as they don't really see any regard for human life, as there is billions of billions of billions of people. They are usually slow, horrible to work with, incredibly grim, and can take centuries to do anything in response to any major threat. So with all this out of the way, no skipping it, let's talk about the Horus Heresy as well as Chaos, as they kind of go hand in hand, and it's easy to lump the two together. Chaos is a concept in 40k, and it's both easy and hard to understand. Basically, the main difference between 40k's universe and ours is this location known as the warp. Think of it like a secondary universe overlaid with ours that vaguely mimics our space, but it's made up of pure psychic energy. All emotions cause this psychic energy to manifest, I guess, in this realm, which is why the warp is seen as a very turbulent and horrible realm. Now, these psychic energies, if they're potent enough, can create little entities, little ghosts to just sort of pop into existence, I guess. In the far future of 40k, the best way of traveling long distance is actually by causing a small tear in reality and then actually going into the warp. The best way I can describe it is it's just like nether highways from Minecraft, where like every block you go in the nether is equal to like 8 blocks or some shit in reality. So in theory, it's actually faster than speed of light or better travel. Chaos is a type of warp energy that exists. The strongest and most volatile emotions a person can feel, despair, ambition, anger, excess, are used to fuel entities that amass in the warp. These are called demons, and it's spelled with an A. And they are the thing of chaos. All they want is to spread more of their own brand of chaos around the universe. Say you're a demon of excess and lust, you just want people to do no good, horrible stuff, so you'll try and trick people into the worst situations. Rage demon? Cause some bloodshed. All the extra emotions feed back to these entities and their dark gods, the gods of chaos, of which there are 4. Only 4. Shut up about the... shut up, nerds. I know. Chaos corrupts. The gods can give some of their infinite power to mortals who please them, and thus you had this kind of schism in the 30k era, as half the Primarchs were corrupted by the forces of chaos, and the other half abstained and stayed loyal to the Imperium of Man. This ended with this massive civil war, causing a whole bunch of upheaval. The Emperor of Mankind ended up getting injured to the point of near death and having to be turned into this thing known as the Golden Throne. This massive piece of technology that no one truly knows its origin point or how it really operates, but it is basically super psychic life support, keeping him alive, but at a huge cost to human life every day to fuel it. Chaos factions are the remnants of this schism. Cults of people who worship dark gods for power and salvation, Space Marine legions who defected from the loyalist side thinking the gods were correct, or just they like killing things. They hate each other a lot, but are willing to work together to spread chaos throughout the stars. They are kind of the main antagonists of 40k most of the time, but not all of the time. So with that being said, time to get into the last faction grouping, and that is the aliens, aka Xenos. This is the most all over the place section, as except for a few handful of these factions, they don't really have anything to do with each other and usually just attack on sight. They are actually probably the easiest to understand at face value, other than that, because they're just aliens, right? So the short list of the aliens is orcs with a K. They are green idiots who love fighting and nothing else. They love the idea of a good scrap, and the idea of giving up is not in an orc's vocabulary, though to be fair, most words aren't. They are a massive threat simply because they are about as strong as a Space Marine off rip, if not stronger sometimes, though they aren't nearly as durable, and show up in hordes trillions strong. Tyranids. These are probably one of the biggest threats of all the aliens in the setting, as they are hyper-adaptive bug aliens with bioguns that collect the genetic materials of all living creatures, and they seek to make the ultimate bio-life form. All they really want is biomass, to consume all things because their hunger knows no bounds. And their most dangerous part is that they adjust their tactics by evolving new creatures to whatever planet they are, and once they have taken over the planet, they drain it of all biological material, turning it into just a lifeless husk. Necron, basically ancient metal skeletons that predate humanity by millions of years. They are sentient consciousnesses put into almost indestructible metal bodies that re-knit themselves if given enough time. They have a strong Egyptian theme, but also have the best tech in the setting. The thing that holds them back is that, one, they are often asleep asleep, slumbering in their tomb worlds until someone finds them and is unlucky enough to wake them up, and then they wake up en masse and usually wipe out all life in the system. And two, there is a uncomfortable amount of political discourse between the various different subgroups of this that kind of prevents them from doing damn near anything most times. The Tau Empire is the next one. Probably the least threatening of all the aliens just because of how small of a faction they are, but they are a small faction on the fringes of the universe, but they have hyper-advanced technology that's especially impressive for how young of a race they are. With some pretty potent machines and also a high level of immunity to chaotic corruption, they use Gundams, long-range rifles, and if you get into melee with them, they just die. End of story. The Eldar are divided into 3 categories: High Elves, Dark Elves, and Clown, as they are exactly what you would think. They are just elves in a sci-fi setting with varying degrees of cruelty. So High Elves, not that cruel. Dark Elves, pretty cruel. Clown, kind of depends on the day. Lastly, but certainly not leastly, the Leagues of Votann, the newest and my favorite faction to be added to 40k. They are space dwarves, not much else to know. They worship ancient floating heads known as the Ancestor Cores or the Votann. They have a strong community of kinship between their various members. They have sentient and sapient AI that work with them. They are also a long-lost offshoot of humanity. They hide this fact because humanity would then have a claim over them, or at least they would say they did. Basically, they used to be humans, but due to years of mutation and evolution, they are now dwarves that barely resemble humans. God, I love the kin. Alright. So, these are the basics of all the factions, though I did have to kind of lightning around that last part for the sake of my editor not having to work on an hour-long video for next week. But, in short, all of these factions have goals, wants, and desires that will often put them into conflict with everything else in the setting, which is kind of why it is such a perfect universe to set a war game. Genuinely, it is one of those anybody can fight anyone and it would make sense kind of deals. Thus, you have the war game, but let's talk about that now. If you're new to wargaming or have never even played one, or you just got sent this by a friend, let me give you a bit of an idea of what a war game exactly is, the general idea, and how to start. Wargaming as a concept has existed for, I'd probably say centuries, but it probably would have even been longer than that. But the modern day context for it has existed for 40 to 60 years, as in the rules are sold and miniatures are sold to go with it. It's a pretty simple concept, universally understood, or at least I kind of thought so. Once again, shout out to my new friend. He literally knew nothing about wargaming, which inspired this video. So in short, wargaming or wargames are games where you and your opponent can assemble armies of miniatures. Unlike traditional boxed games, the miniatures are not static, as in you aren't playing the same force every single time unless you're really trying to learn how to play a specific army. For example, in Warhammer 40k 10th edition, if you play a Space Marine army and I play a Space Marine army, we are going to likely have some similar models, but our miniatures are probably going to be different across the board. The miniatures themselves, in-game, represent game pieces with stat lines, rules, and abilities that make your army unique. Each one plays into the strategy that is usually acted out upon the game. What do I mean? Well, some games are like Capture the Flag, where you have to get one of your miniatures to a certain spot on the table, pick up the flag, make it known that the miniature that picked it up has it, then get it back to your base of operations in order to win the game. That's a very simple game plan, but that is how you can build your army to be very good at that. Every game system in general is kind of different in how they do it, but the best way to see it is to build your army around a points currency system. You and your opponent will state like, I want to play a 1,000-point game. So each miniature has a cost, and you have 1,000 points to spend in order to build up that cost. Each miniature can be lower or higher than others, and each one is statted out differently. With 40k, Games Workshop tends to be very intricate with trying to balance the points, and they usually don't do it well. But there is, a certain science and an art to it. Most games have a different way of measuring it, which is why we get into the different scales of the game. War games, or at least traditional war games, like big-scale war games, can have maybe dozens upon dozens of miniatures on the table, up to hundreds if you're playing a horde faction, and can go into the thousands of points. As you and your opponent are gonna throw groupings of miniatures at each other. These groups of miniatures are usually called units, and each unit in 40k has a minimum size and a maximum size. One costs more, one costs less, but basically the benefit is you can have more of a single guy in one unit. So let's look at the humble Space Marine Intercessor. The minimum for these guys is 5 dudes, but you can have them up to 10 dudes for an increased cost. You can put that in your army. The squad itself deploys on the board, which is usually 44 inches by 60 inches in terms of like table size, filled with terrain that represents ruins, trees, and each one has different rules depending on what you're doing with it, but don't bog yourself down with that right now. And this is called a unit of guys. They cannot be separated by a certain range of inches, so they have to be within 2 inches of every other miniature in the units. You know, no wandering off, or else they get the punishment hose. You will have many different units depending on the game to make up your army. Character units that are a single model that lead other units to make them better. Support units like medics. Each one can do something different. It's up to you to kind of assemble your army how you want to play the game. Do you like to hit fast and hard? Put a bunch of guys with guns on motorcycles. You want to be slow and moving but very heavily armored? Tanks. Tanks are always universally good strategy. You want to do the Zerg rush like you're playing StarCraft? Wait, actually, that's not a thing you can do. I forgot the StarCraft game is actually out now. That's kind of weird. Either way, that's kind of how wargames are generically formatted. You fill up the points, buy the miniatures, put them together, paint them to whatever you want, or do what most other people do who do casually, which is they just don't paint them because they're evil. There's also another type of category known as rank and flank. The main difference there is movement, where on traditional wargames you have circular bases and can move around more freely. Rank and flank, they are on squares and have to be ranked up in a brick, which is usually 5 by 3. So you can go higher than that sometimes, you can go lower than that. Some of them are static, some of them are not. But you have to factor in more movement, like you're moving a tank rather than you are moving guys independently in small squads of 10. It's a lot more complicated, just don't focus on it too much right now. But from there, you go to the smallest scale of a war game, which is what is referred to as a skirmish game. Now, skirmish games have kind of been seeing a renaissance recently because they're very easy to produce, or at least easier than a large-scale war game. You're going to be making a team of guys to accomplish a goal instead of making an army. The game usually plays with between 7 and 15 models. These dudes can go off in any direction rather than having to stay close to their squad mates, and there is an emphasis on the individual rather than the group. But the strength of individual models really shines in these kinds of games because it allows you to pull off these cool plays that have really kind of, endeared me to the genre relatively recently because I've been getting really huge into skirmish games a lot. It's also one of the cheapest types of games you can get into because usually you just need to get a single box of miniatures for it and you're good. The main game for 40k right now is Kill Team, and I'd highly suggest that if you're interested in anything I've said, pick up a box of Kill Team miniatures because they are usually something that can feed into a normal army, but also they're very stylized, very flashy, and they're very fun to play. I mean, I'd recommend you play Necromunda, which is another fantastic game, but that requires a little bit more of a commitment. Another game that I've been playing recently is Conquest First Blood. I have an affiliate link in the description if you want to use that, I guess. Conquest First Blood has been an addiction of mine recently. I've also been trying out Corvus Belli's Infinity, which is also amazing. It is quite fun. But say you want to get into 40k as a war game to start. Don't think about it too much. Just pick whichever faction sounds the coolest or looks the coolest to you. Grab a Kill Team box, get a friend to do the same, work together, learn the rules. Both of you read the rulebook on your own and then correct each other as you go. Then meet other people in the community who play Kill Team or, talk to people online to learn how to play better. Because of that, you get that kind of community. Paint your models and go from there. The 40k community is weirdly accepting most of the time as long as you don't play Tau. You are gonna find that this is one of the best communities to join in general. This is where I'm gonna kind of bare my soul a little bit, but I'm not gonna lie, 40k and wargaming have changed my life. I was someone who kind of drifted between interests as I was growing up and nothing really stuck to me the same way wargaming has. And even before my YouTube channel, it is just one of the best things I could do. It is inherently a social game. You have to meet up with people in order to play the game, and thus you need to talk to them. And this leads leads to you turning randos into some of the best friends you've ever made, which I have to say, I've done that. A lot of the friends that I talk to nowadays are literally just because of the war games that I played with them. Even beyond that, the communities online are so helpful and willing to teach you what you need to know to be better, because most people are in it for the same reason you are, because they love the game, they love the setting, and so on. And don't even get me started about the online communities. Like the 40K artist community that are out there, they are some of the most passionate and talented weirdos I've seen in my entire life, creating some of the greatest pieces of art that I've ever witnessed. And I've been literally in art circles before. Before I did 40K, I was a voice actor who worked with literal animators who did this as a job, and I'm still blown away by some of the stuff that I see. Like, as a quick aside, I had an interaction with one recently, and I am sorry, I'm saying your name wrong. I'm a Northeastern Canadian and also an idiot, and also bad at saying things, but Guy Arantz, I'm hoping I'm saying that wrong, I'm so sorry. Gotta shout this fella out, because my goodness, their art is so goddamn good. They're probably one of the best Necron artists I've ever seen, and yeah, I've used some of their stuff in my videos, and I think I'm gonna start shouting out more artists that, like, I see online more frequently, because genuinely the 40K art community does not get enough in terms of just attention. I had an interaction with this individual recently, and they're really cool to talk to. So if you want to commission them, support them, they are a very talented artist. I'm going to put their stuff in my description. Feel free to do so. While I'm at it, once again, shout out to Lulzy Robot for doing the channel icon for my YouTube page. Shit is iconic, and she is a fantastic artist as well. Also, shout out to Inhumanite Art, aka Kip, one of my best friends for, like, I'd say maybe 6 years now. And if you've seen any art of me on this channel, like any of the icons that you see used to illustrate my points, or the art that you've seen of my editor Alice poking in from any of the sides, that was done by Kip. So yeah, feel free to look them up. They're always looking for commissions and work, and they're weirdly cheap. I love the 40K community. I love painting models, I love the lore, I love the art. I still a 10th edition. But you know what? I still paint Kroot and Leagues of Votann alongside that, because 11th edition looks like stealth is going to be kind of fun. This setting in the community has such a breadth of knowledge to absorb and enrich your life with. So if anything I have said has gotten your attention, I suggest using this baseline knowledge to take one of the next steps, which is one of these three. One, go buy a box of minis, like I said before, and meet your local community and play some games. It's a great way to learn about different factions and just the flow of the game. Two, research Primarchs and their shenanigans, as that's a good jumping off point to learn about damn near every other setting or faction in the game. Or three, pick an alien race and start learning from there. And by an alien race, I mean the Leagues of Votann, because we need more people. Regardless, I hope this has helped to some degree with your understanding, and I hope your friend is going to stop pestering you by sending you 40K memes and hoping you just get it at some point. Either way, let me know what you all think in the comments down below. Do you like this style of generalist content where I make a good introductory video to get people who don't know anything about 40K into the setting? Or do you think this is just going to be terrible? Because if you like it, I'll make a part 2 and cover maybe the factions in depth and do kind of a beginner's guide to Space Marines or something. Just a starter pack of some sort. That being said, special thanks to my channel members for supporting me, my editors, and everything else. With your help, I am able to do this job, and I love it. As I've said before, I genuinely am very passionate about the 40K community and wargaming as a whole, and it genuinely means the world to me that I can be doing this and just exist. It's kind of crazy to think about. Thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful night.